All right. So we've been talking about, we're doing a sermon series on spiritual gifts and community life, functioning in what we're calling revelatory giftings, like the list in Corinthians 12 especially. And then Scott's been laying the groundwork on some stuff that's kind of you need a good foundation where this is coming from. Like a lot of things, if you have it in the wrong context, it's completely different. Like, let's eat, comma, grandma, or let's eat grandma, no comma. Very different. So, context is important, and punctuation is important too, but that's not the point I was trying to make. Scott's talked about things like, it's an old vineyard phrase, everybody gets to play. Everybody gets to play in the playground. It's just an expression for, hey, everybody gets to do the stuff that Jesus did, the stuff the gifts that Paul talks about in Corinthians 12. It's not for a select few. It's for all of us. Doesn't matter how little time has passed since you became a follower of Jesus, or how long it's been, or what happened in between. It's for all of us. And a couple sermons ago, I think it was a couple weeks ago, he talked about spiritual authority, delegated and original spiritual authority that lies with Jesus, with God, right? And then how he delegated it to us. Jesus said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And so if he has all authority, how much authority does the devil have? 0, yeah. So, but then he delegated that to us because he said, go therefore. He says, based on that, in my authority, in my name, go and do these things, right? And he talked about other passages where Jesus promised that we would be able to do things that only God would normally be able to do because he's working in us and through us. And then last week, he talked about bringing heaven to earth. And how many of you remember that discussion from last week? Okay, good, yeah. Scott remembers, yeah. He showed a cool video and talked about that, how bringing, remember the pockets of heaven, right? Wherever we go, we're heaven's with us, right? Because now the church is the place where heaven and earth meet. Each person, Jesus started it. He was the firstborn, the first one. And now heaven and earth meet inside of us. We're the dwelling place. He's not in a tabernacle or a temple anymore. And so where we go, heaven walks around with us. And we're bringing heaven to earth. And that's the assignment of the believer as he goes and as she makes disciples, as she teaches them to observe everything that he's commanded us, as he baptizes, all that stuff, right? And he's also been leaving homework. And then last week, this was the homework specifically. Has your passion, it was 2 questions. Has your passion for the supernatural dissipated? These are 2 questions that you had to pray about. How many thought and prayed about that? Has your passions for the supernatural dissipated? I was thinking that for God, there's no supernatural, it's just natural. And really what this is what we as, without God, our natural realm is really subnatural. There's natural and subnatural. And because Scott talked about this, it's in our DNA to just do what Jesus did. Like once we're his offspring, right? We're made child of God. My kids have some of my DNA. They all look like me in some way. They all look like Valerie in some way. It's natural for that to happen. It's natural when it's in our DNA to do the supernatural, what we call the supernatural. It's kind of what humans were meant to be. So that was question 1. Question 2, Are you a spectator or a participant? Are you a spectator or participant? If we all get to play, have you been kind of standing on the sideline, or are you getting involved? And the deal is, pray about these things and ask God what he thinks. Because I know that when I ask myself and kind of search my own heart, most of the time I end up with the wrong answer. Sometimes I miss something that God's like, oh yeah, that's really obvious, and I miss it. Sometimes I pick on things that he's not really concerned about. So I don't know, so that affects some personalities more than others. I'm one of those that it's pretty easy for me to find something wrong and be kind of, subject to shame or condemnation or something like that. And Jesus might not really be concerned about that right now. He might really be concerned about something else. He might be just like, that's actually not, that thing you're feeling is not me. That's just condemnation from the enemy. So ask the Lord what he thinks about those things. So that, if you need to get caught up on the homework, just like in school, that's okay. You can still get caught up. No penalty for doing it late. That's right. Has your passion for the supernatural dissipated? Are you a spectator or a participant? Okay. So today, we've been talking about if everybody gets to play, right, and if we all have the same Holy Spirit, if doing the works that Jesus did, if we get to do those too, right, then it kind of brings some interesting group dynamics sometimes, because we're all doing it. We're all playing together, and we're all supposed to be extending this playing and kind of maybe a team mentality. We're all extending that metaphor. We're all on the same team. We're supposed to play together, right? And so doing that together, there's some interesting group dynamics that come out of that. And so we're going to talk about those in the next few sermons. And what I want to start with today is this observation. It's hard to receive something from someone that you don't think has much to offer, or doesn't have anything to offer that you want. How many of you would say that's true? Yeah, there's no brainers. Like, if I wanted $1 million from somebody who clearly didn't have $1 million, would I get it? Should I expect to get it? No. Does that make me want to ask them? No, because I know they don't have it. It's hard to receive something from somebody that doesn't have something to offer, but I'm, of course, not talking about material things. It's also hard to, we don't want to receive something from someone we don't respect or we have some kind of disdain or dislike for, right? Like I'd rather my buddy lend me some cash than this guy that I, don't really care for. He's probably going to insist that I pay him back. Start making up all this reasons. I haven't even talked to the guy, but it's because maybe we don't get along. And so it's hard to receive that. If somebody says, "Hey, I want to give you something. I want to pray for you. I want to bless you," and I'm like, right? Is that an accurate observation? I'm not asking you to confess if that's you. I'm just asking if that's an accurate observation in general about humans. Yeah, okay, I see enough heads nodding. All right. So, yeah, I'm asking for a friend. So, what's tragic about this is that this thing where we don't want to receive or are kind of leery is most often it affects us with the people we're closest to, because we know them better. And it is a tragedy, but most often that's where it hits the hardest. And Jesus experienced this, and so I want to read a passage. I want us to read a passage and talk about that a little bit. Most of you probably familiar with this. It's in all three of the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John makes kind of an oblique reference to kind of the outcome of that, but he doesn't tell the whole story. So you know that if it's in all three, it's something that impacted the early church fairly significantly. I mean, in all four. All right, so Mark 6, I'm going to read the account in Mark. The he here is Jesus. He went away from there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue. That was his custom at the time. He was being known as a teacher. He'd go into the synagogue, he'd teach. And it says that many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How is it that such mighty works are done by his hands?" So far, so good, right? They're impressed. But something happened here. We don't know what it was, but something shifted. I mean, we don't know how it happened, what it looked like. Just the account just starts to talk about a shift, because they start by saying, "Where did he get these things? What is this wisdom? How is it that this happens?" And then they're like, verse 3, "Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" They knew him. They knew his whole family since he was little. And they took offense at him. Verse 4, "And Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and among his relatives and in his own household." And listen to this. "And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them." That was like his low bar. Could only heal a few sick people by laying hands directly on them. But he could do no mighty work there. And the last verse 6, says, "And he marveled because of their unbelief." He marveled because of their unbelief. That was the root, their unbelief. Right? So the anointing of the Holy Spirit on Jesus, the Son of God, was kind of curbed, shut down in some way to a certain degree, where he could only heal a few sick people. And it was because of their unbelief. Which, one thing I think is, man, if that happened to Jesus, what chance do I have? But anyway, it's because of their unbelief. And here's the thing. It says they took offense at him. That word, to take offense, means there's a metaphor there. The word is set a trap, but that's like the literal meaning. But if you use it as a metaphor, like as an idiom, it means to stumble, cause something to stumble. So they stumbled over him. They stumbled over him, meaning like they stumbled over something about him. Something about him made them stumble and doubt and cause this unbelief of like, I don't know. What was it? Well, it says right before that they started going, wait a minute. We know this guy. I remember when he was running around. Little kid. I changed his diaper once. What they were saying is, he's not special, he's common. He's not special, he's common. We know him. Luke's account is longer and kind of expands on this. It mentions that Jesus, he directly from coming back out of the desert, from fasting in 40 days and nights, and then being tempted by the devil, he resisted those temptations, and it says he came in power. And he was going around just tearing it up. It says that the report about him went throughout all the surrounding country, and he taught in their synagogues, being glorified by all. That's what Luke's account says. So he had a reputation. And when he gets to his hometown, they're like, wait, this is the guy we've been hearing? Remember, there was no internet back then. So they just heard reports about some guy, right? And then when they see him, they're like, wait, this is the guy? He's not special, he's common. And I'm like, In fact, Jesus sensed this in Luke's account. Jesus sensed this in the crowd, and he says to them, I know what you're thinking. It's in Luke 4 if you want to read it later. He says, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, you should do the miracles that you've done elsewhere. Come on, show us something, buddy. That's what Jesus says in the Nathan paraphrase. And he points out two things associated with this. A prophet is not without honor except in his home country. He mentions two stories in the Old Testament where this happened. One was Elijah. And he says there are lots of widows. If you want to read it, it's in 1 Kings 17. This story of Elijah where he goes to this widow and they don't have any food, but Elijah says, "Hey, make me some food anyway." And then the jar of oil and the jar of grain it doesn't run out the whole time he's there. But Jesus points out this was a woman in Sidon, a neighboring country. And he says, there are a lot of widows in Israel back then, but it happened outside. And then he mentions this story of Elisha, and it's in 2 Kings 5. He says, there were a lot of lepers in Elisha's time too, but only Naaman, who was a Syrian, was the one that got healed. And he's pointing out, he's pointing this out to them, and they get his meaning, and they get angry. And they try to throw him off a cliff, literally. A little more exciting story. Adds some details there. That his Luke's account. So Jesus experienced this, right? You could say it this way: familiarity bred contempt, and it led to unbelief. They're like, And this was Jesus, right? No sin. What about me? When you're like, I've known you a while. I remember that time you got angry, just flew off the handle. I remember that time that you were just rude to me. Familiarity, and we notice those things about people, right? Any married couples in the room? Has that ever happened? Am I stepping on some toes? Yeah. Asking for a friend. Because we know each other the best, right? We know each other's dirty laundry. So here's the thing. Jesus was making an observation, but he wasn't saying that this is the way it should be. All right, that's important. Jesus wasn't saying this is how it should be. This is how I love it to be. I can't change anything about this. This is just the way it is. He wasn't saying any of that. He was just making an observation. This is how it is. But really, it shouldn't be that way. Familiarity should breed honor. The more I know you, the more I appreciate you. The more I know you, the more I see, wow, you're a really good person. And that happens in marriages too. I don't want to just paint the dark side. And that's what should happen. Familiarity should breed honor, not contempt. It's not enough that we should say, okay, well, I'm not going to have disdain or disregard for somebody. We should actually come in an opposite spirit to this contempt or disregard and actually come in honor and esteem, right? An opposite, not just a neutral. And it's a tragedy that the ones closest to us, this is what happens the most often. It's God's design that we should honor. Remember the 7th commandment, is it? Honor your father and mother so it will go well with you. There's a promise. There's something that flows from that honor. It's the first commandment with a promise, as has been pointed out elsewhere in the scriptures. So this honoring of each other positions us to receive. It's hard to receive from somebody that you kind of have some dislike or disregard for, we said, right? You could receive from them if you're kind of neutral about them. You'll receive even more and better if your attitude is one of honor, of esteem, of value. So that's what honoring does, and there's a lot of reasons to honor. I mean, it's within love your neighbor, right? Love one another. It's all in that. But because this is talking about spiritual gifts, we're focusing in on receiving, especially when there's a gift placed. Okay. Jesus had this to say. He said, "Whoever," this is in Matthew 10, "whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me." You have to, he's saying to the disciples, and the context here is right, it was when he was sending out the 12 to go out and minister. And he's saying, if they receive you, they'll receive me. And he tells them, like, if they don't receive you, just leave, right? So he's saying, if they don't receive you, they're not going to receive me, right? He says, and he gives this example, the one who receives a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And the one who receives a righteous person because he is a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. Verse 42, "And whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward." He says, even if you just give them somebody a cup of cold water, not for no reason, but if you're giving it to them because you're a disciple, you're not going to lose your reward by any means. Who's the rewarder there? Is it the guy that received the cup? Is he the one that gives some reward? No, it's Jesus, right? God sees that honor, and there's a reward that comes. Remember, the gifts and all that, they're from him. We don't have anything like that even compares. So, you guys get the concept? All right. Let me give you a scenario. Let's say there's like what back in the day we used to call an altar call, which means at the end of a sermon or in the middle of a service or whatever, there's a, hey, if you need this or that, come up and get some prayer, right? Let's say somebody says that, and there's 4 people up here that you could get prayer from. And let's say that one of them is a person that you know well, and you like them, and you respect them, and actually they've prayed for you about other things in the past with success. Okay? That's person 1. Person 2 is somebody that you know, but your personality and their personalities don't. You got nothing against the guy or gal, but these guys just, every time I'm around him, every time I'm around her, we just rub each other the wrong way. I mean, they're fine, but yeah, that's person 2. Person 3, somebody that you know also, but you know some of their skeletons in the closet. They have something that maybe kind of gives you some pause. It might be that they're just a young believer compared to you. It might be that there's something they struggle with that you're thinking you should be past that. I'm not talking about like, unconfessed adultery or something crazy. I'm talking about something, the more common things that we're all subject to, but maybe you're not, and that person is, and you know that about them. So there's that thing. And then person 4 is someone that you don't really know that well. You figure, hey, they're up there, so the leaders must trust them, but you don't really know them. And let's say you really need prayer for something. Who do you go to? And like really, if you all say, I'd go to anybody, no question, no hesitation. If every one of you says that, I would say think again. Not because I have a low opinion of any of you individually, but just because I know that in a group this size, there's something like that. I know that I've had those. We'll talk about that later. I'll tell them myself in a few minutes. Who do you go to? Let's make it more interesting. The first person, the one that you know and like and all that. And the fourth person, the one that you don't know, but you figure, they're both already praying for somebody. Do you go up or do you wait for one of them to be free? Like, what would you do? Well, like, what have you done in the past? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. Who are you trying to receive something from? One of those four people? It's from God. You're trying to, yeah, I'll get to that in a second. You're trying to receive something from God, right? And if they're believers, can God like work through them and give you something anyway? Even if it's like a terrible, uneloquent kind of fumbling prayer? Is God like limited by that? Is he moved by more eloquence? Thank God for me that he's not. He doesn't require that. You're trying to receive from God. That doesn't matter. Can God work through any of them? Because if we all get to play, and if we all have these gifts, if God can work through all of us, remember his power is perfected in weakness. God mentioned that to Paul, right? He said, when in your weakest, that's when I'm strongest. Okay. Then I can really tell. I know that's from when in my life, I'm like, man, I did this and that happened. I know it was God, because like, no way could I have done that. And I'm not talking about necessarily even, heal somebody, raise someone from the dead. I'm talking about like, I don't even like this. I heard somebody say, God's given me this ministry to children. He says, I don't like children. Yeah, and he was talking about small children. It's like they're like, they're snotty. They're always crying. They're like babies and stuff. And he's like, but when I pray for them, I know, like their parents, they give me reports about it. So then it's God, right? Power perfected in weakness, because you're like, there's no way that was me. So any of those folks, because what is it about? It's about your belief. I'm coming to receive something from God, and he has something for me through one of these folks. Just stand up there. Doesn't matter. Now, Tony, good setup question. Because I want to say next, well, let's back up. Do you stand up at all? Right? God can just touch me right here. I don't need somebody else to pray for me. And I wonder if that's the one that is seen a little bit more in our body, for whatever reasons. I could be wrong, but here's some reasons. Pride. Like, I got this. I don't need prayer for it. I just need to work it out. I can handle it. It's not a big deal. I'm good. I don't need that. I can handle it. That's pride. Fear of man is another one. What will people think? They'll be like, man, he goes up every week for prayer. His life must be messed up. What is he struggling with? Like, well, what will people think, right? Fear of man. Another one might be unbelief or disappointment. Just you've gone up for prayer before about that and nothing happened, and you're at that point where you're just like a little jaded. And that can affect the person praying too. Like, I've prayed for this before. How do I pray like this is the first time I've prayed for it? That's what I want to do. To have that same level of belief, of faith, like it's the first time I ever prayed for it. And I just know it's going to happen. Do we go up at all, or do we hide behind this? It's religious sounding facade, like, well, God is all sufficient, and so he could touch me right here. If he wants to do it, he'll just make it happen right here. It sounds pretty good. It sounds pretty religious. It sounds like you're saying, yeah, I believe in God, and so I know that he's not limited. Well, the thing is, his way of operating is and has always been to do it through people. That's just how he works. That's why he said to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply and fill the whole earth and subdue it. He didn't make a huge garden, earth-enveloping garden. He made this little garden, and then he said to them, okay, make the rest of the world like this. Let's do it together. He chose Abraham and his family. Then they're a great nation. He always wanted to do it through people. Now it's the church. He always wants to do it through people. That's why we get the Holy Spirit as the one who's empowers us, right? Jesus said, don't go anywhere yet on this mission until you've been clothed with power from on high, because he wants to do it together. So if you think that God can do it just here and I don't need to go up for prayer, it's not wrong that he can do it, but just know that that's not how he wants to do it. And if you're going to tell God, I want you to give me something on my terms, it probably is not going to happen. He's not a cosmic vending machine. I want this, Lord, but if you're going to do it, I don't want anybody else to be involved. I want it to happen on Thursday. He's not that kind of God. He always wants to work through people. Remember Paul when he was blinded, and Ananias, God comes to Ananias and says, Paul's been praying, and so I want you to go heal him. Well, God already knew that Paul needed something. He actually mentions it. Why didn't God just heal him? He actually sent Ananias some. It's kind of funny because he told Ananias he's been praying and he saw a vision that somebody named Ananias went to heal him. So it's kind of like he's saying, I already told him you were going to go. So could you go? And that's not a request. Anyway. Yeah, and this has all happened to me, right? We're running short on time, so I'm not going to give long examples, but there's been times I've gotten it right and times I've gotten it wrong. I remember going to this healing school put on by Bethel Church. This was 2009, and disappointed to find out that the people that I knew, like Bill Johnson or whatever, that knew the names, weren't there. And I was thinking, yeah, I paid some good money for this. Not that I was paying them, but, the facilities, the meals, all the stuff that came with it, right? There was a charge. And I was like, boy, was I wrong. But I noticed that my attitude started to change, because when the first guy came up and he just, we did some worship, and when he introduced the first speaker, the way he talked about him, like, man, it was honoring. That's like the best introduction I had ever heard, and it wasn't his accolades, his degrees, his accomplishments. It was just honoring statements. And I realized later it turned my heart towards, yeah, I could receive something from this guy. It's powerful. So God kind of taught me there. There's another time at North Point when they were having the baptism things there, if you were involved in that, you know what I'm talking about. If not, it doesn't matter. Just that I was there, and this guy wanted to, he said, "Can I pray for you?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I don't know, I was just in one of those moods where, like, man, I was just really happy, and I didn't know this guy from Adam. I'd never seen him, but I just knew, man, this will be good. He's going to pray for me. God's going to do something. I said, "Lay it on me, brother." And I closed my eyes, and there was a pause, and I opened one eye, and I realized that, like, he was trying to figure it out if I was joking, or I don't think he thought I was mocking him, but there's something there, like he was thinking, he wasn't expecting that reaction from me, because I didn't know him, he didn't know me, you know, like maybe he was expecting me, I don't know, some kind of vetting process to whether you could pray for me. I don't know what he thought. Man, I got such a good word from him. I still remember it. And it was because I was like, yeah, I'm expecting to get something good right here. My brother's going to pray for me. And he has the same spirit. It's going to be awesome. That was one time I got it right. So we'll continue these discussions in the coming at least 2 sermons. These group dynamics. And so the one for today is to receive. We all get to play. So in these groups, we're all here. We all look different. We all might be at different personalities. We all might be different stages of development as believers. And the thing is, God doesn't say, well, you're a young believer, so you only get the starter pack of the Holy Spirit, like the junior version. He just doesn't do that. God has a very high opinion of how well you can minister when He's empowering you. He thinks that you can do when you plus God is always a majority. I mean, he really thinks that if I'm empowering you, there's not much you can't do. And so it doesn't. And so He says, so it doesn't matter. There's no requirements, no minimum level. If you're a believer, that's it. So it's important for us to recognize that, and honor positions us to receive those things, right? To receive what God has for us. Because remember, He's the gift giver. He's the one that gives these gifts however He likes. He doesn't only give the gifts you need to the people you like. Sorry to break it to you. And everybody gets something. He doesn't say you're not ready. And He apportions them however He likes. And it's so that we would all, because He wants to work through us all, and He says, yeah, build each other up. Here it is. And remember, those gifts aren't on you or in you for your benefit anyway. Read 1 Corinthians 12. It's for the body. They're not yours. They're to give away. They're gifts, but they're like in care of Nathan Coventon. But they're for Mike Series, for Bruno, for Bev, for whomever, right? I'm just the one like going, okay. Here you go. Lord, can we have one with a pretty bow on it? So honor positions us to that, and we have to have that attitude of we so value what God can do in us, the words that He brings us. We so value that we're looking for it everywhere. We're looking for it everywhere because we so value the words of Jesus. And they're going to come through somebody. And my eyes are peeled for what He's going to say to me. Okay?